Hello, everybody. How are you doing today? Hope everybody's having a happy Friday. If you're obviously down in ANZ, it is Friday today. If you're in most of the rest of the world, not everywhere, but most of the rest of the world, it will be your Thursday. And this is my very first live broadcast and live stream to LinkedIn using StreamYard, and it's my very first ever live stream to LinkedIn. I've live streamed to Facebook and to YouTube before, but now that I've just recently been given access to LinkedIn Live, it's super exciting to be here. And I've decided to set up a weekly stream covering the week that was in e-commerce. It's awesome to be here with you guys, and I'll try to be really super consistent with my weekly live streams. And really what I want to talk about more than anything else is just really covering the major happenings that have happened in the digital and e-commerce world over the last week, give you my thoughts and my take on it. Sometimes I'll have posted about these before on LinkedIn or other channels. Sometimes I won't have. Sometimes I'll be adding a few more thoughts that I wasn't able to post about before, and really just start that dialogue being able to happen. And so hopefully, thanks, Mike. It's pretty cool. I could see that your comments there, which is awesome. It's pretty, StreamYard actually is pretty cool. It allows you to interact with live streams, and when you see comments come in, it'll tell you what channel they've come in on. And as I said, this is my first ever live stream through using StreamYard, so really sort of still getting used to the platform and how it works and how I can engage and interact with everybody. So it's a little bit of a learning experience and learning curve for me too, but it's super cool to be here. And yeah, super cool to have you along for the ride. And as I said, I'll try to make this a consistent weekly stream. So let's, and it's going to run for about 30 minutes, as I've talked about before. Try to keep it to about 30 minutes, so don't take up too much of your Friday. And oftentimes I may have a bourbon in hand. I don't today, but oftentimes on a late Friday afternoon, I'll crack open a nice bourbon and have a quick drink. So without further ado, let's get into talking about some of the things that have happened this week. Now, one of the big announcements that I try to always cover off is any major sort of acquisition, merger, anything happen in the major e-commerce technology space, staying across that and the impacts that I think that's going to have on the industry as a result. And one thing we know for sure, and we've just seen this accelerate over the last 18 months during to COVID, is the major tech players in the commerce space, they've tended to get very big and bigger because of COVID. And the smaller sort of weaker players or players with less penetration, they tended to be acquired over the last 18 months. That's just, and that's across pretty much every piece of the commerce stack in terms of technology. So whether that be PIM, whether that be CDP, whether that be personalization platforms, doesn't really matter what it is. We've seen mass and pause platforms, for that matter, have become the hot topic of the day. And even smaller e-commerce platform players have started to get acquired at pace. We've got Amazon that's acquired Sells. We've got lots of other acquisitions that have happened over the last 12 to 18 months, and it's an exciting and dynamic space. And COVID's just accelerated that along. So the brands that have done really well out of COVID and have managed to capitalize throughout the COVID period have been able to consolidate and acquire sort of smaller, weaker brands, and we're seeing that right across the whole of the commerce stack. And that is there is no greater example of that, I guess, than what we've seen over the last week. We've seen some massive acquisitions. We've seen Nosto acquire Stackla, and that's a really exciting acquisition for me. I know the Nosto platform quite well. I've implemented it before. It's a really exciting personalization platform, and it's exciting to see how Nosto has evolved over the years. And when I first implemented Nosto a few years ago, it was basically a personalization platform only for product recommendations. Hey, Ralph, awesome to see you. Thanks for joining the stream. Really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks for commenting. Yeah, so Nosto, I implemented Nosto the first time a few years ago when I was at HealthPost and implemented that through the retail channels there. And Nosto really was, although it was a personalization platform and although it was a kind of a search and merch platform, it really wasn't focused on the search side. It was focused primarily on the merch side. And it was primarily focused on product recommendations. So it was a really super smart AI sort of rules-driven product recommendations engine. It would take lots of, I guess, feeds and lots of data points from all over the commerce experience. As you traversed the website, it would track right from the point where you landed on the website, whether that be you came from search into a long tail keyword page that was a product page, or whether you landed on the home page and you navigated from there. Right from that point forward, it'd start tracking your interaction. And if it detected your interaction before via cookie, then it would pick up where it left off in terms of the product recommendation. So it tracked things like, what pages you visited, which categories you visited, which products you visited, which products you added to your shopping cart, which products got added to your wish list or your compare list. Which products did you purchase? Which products did you abandon in your cart? And all sorts of other cues from your experience on the website. And it would amalgamate all that together, and then it would make key product recommendations in certain placements throughout the website. And most of those placements were little blocks of product recommendations on product pages and cart pages, and various other places. Sometimes there might be a block on the homepage. And then Nosto also has the ability to inject its recommendations on a personalized basis into emails as well. They've got an integration with Klaviyo and various other marketing automation platforms. And it's pretty cool to see how Nosto has evolved from being kind of a pure product recommendations engine that's driven by AI to a product recommendation engine, a content journey recommendation engine. And now with Stackla, they're going to be able to integrate UGC, or user-generated content, into that journey. So presumably they're going to be able to bring in things like product reviews, ratings, product questions and answers. They're going to be able to bring in social UGC. So when there's mentions of a product or a brand, they'll be able to sync that in, as long as the profiles are linked from the social profile to the website. So I see this Stackla acquisition as really broadening the horizon of what Nosto is able to do quite dramatically. And it's not only able to do it in terms of integrating the UGC itself and displaying it on the website, for example, on a product page, if someone's commented positively about the product and bringing in that stream of consciousness into the product page, they'll also be able to start injecting that experience into the browsing experience of customers where it's relevant for them. So if you visited a product page before, you might see a relevant piece of UGC content pop up throughout your browsing journey, even when you're not on the product page for that product, because you may have visited that product before, or it's relevant to a category that you visited. So I see this Nosto acquisition as being really, really quite exciting, and it broadens what Nosto is going to be able to do in terms of recommendations quite dramatically. It's obviously going to take them some time to integrate the two technologies together to make it completely seamless and sort of drop in, turn it on, and away it goes. But I'm excited to see where this heads. So yeah, keep your eye on the space. I'll be keeping my eye on the space. I'm going to actually have Jim Lofgren from Nosto on the podcast really soon. So we're going to record a podcast together. I'm going to ask him about the Stackla acquisition and really what his vision for the future of Nosto is. And I'm really looking forward to that episode. So keep your eyes out on the podcast for that episode. It'll probably be released within the next few weeks. If we just move on from that and we move on to some maybe less than fantastic news out in the marketplace, we've got Coinbase, Basecamp, Shopify, and Medium. I spoke to this on LinkedIn before in terms of a post, and we've all had these kind of almost like a crisis of culture within all four of these businesses within the last few months, and to the point where there's been communications going out from either the CEOs or the leadership or the hiring teams within the business, and really they've put out these culture memos to the business. And sometimes it's because there's kind of almost been an uprising within the business, and there's been staff that have complained about maybe the company culture or the company work environment, or perhaps the lack of diversity in the teams, whether that be racial or gender or whatever the case may be. So we've had these sort of crises of culture happening to all these major tech companies. And then I saw today, which I wanted to talk about as well and bring into this, is even non-tech companies, and the way that the companies are responding to these complaints of staff is becoming much more public and much more open. So there's really no place to hide on the modern internet. And if we look at well, that dropped off the shelf. If we look at BrewDog, which is a beer brewer out of Scotland, a major microbrewery. Well, they're not so micro anymore. They're now a massive international brewery. They own, I think, like 100 bars around the world. And they just had the Punk letter. They've got a Punk IPA beer, and they had ex-staff members. I think it was about 65 ex-staff members who have written an open letter to the CEO complaining about the company culture and the culture of fear within the business, and very much a similar type of staff or ex-staff uprising as what we've seen at Coinbase and Basecamp and Shopify and Medium. And really, I think in their first response to that, at least in terms of BrewDog, it was really interesting to see them look at potentially trying to defend themselves. And we've seen that, with some of these other major tech brands, the first thing they do, and particularly with Amazon, I mean, Amazon has been particularly egregious in the way that they have publicly addressed any complaints from their staff around working conditions or anything like that. They pretty much, they've derailed unionization in I think all instances. I don't think any attempt to unionize by Amazon staff has been successful. So Amazon's been particularly atrocious in this regard. And I think what we're starting to see is that the lines between corporate responsibility and personal private activism, those are becoming blurred. And so staff oftentimes, they want to work for and feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves and something bigger than the company that they're working for. And they want to feel like they're working towards something better. They want to feel like they're working towards a cause of some variety, whereas their employers oftentimes want them to behave as if there's a massive distinction and separation between them as a human being and them as a human that works for the company. And I think that this is going to come to a head. It already has come to a head and become very, very public over the last few months. And I think this is going to continue to be a friction point between teams and leadership, particularly within tech companies who have an increasingly important role and play an increasingly important role in our lives. These companies are being held to account by the public, but they're also being held to account by their staff. And so if there is a mismatch between what they're telling their teams internally and their external behavior with customers or their public-facing persona, that is going to be exposed pretty quickly. And whether that's an anonymous exposure because people are afraid of getting fired or backlash in a lot more situation that is brewing, to coin a phrase. It's an interesting issue that's brewing in the marketplace. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I think the next thing I really want to talk about is the release of BigCommerce B2B edition. It wasn't exactly news over the last week. It's been in the last couple of weeks. It's come out, and what I'm seeing in the marketplace that I think from a news perspective is this pivoting away from purely B2C retail e-commerce news to where we're getting a much more balanced view from the general press and the general pundits in the marketplace around e-commerce. We're getting a lot more balance. And I'm actually, frankly, very happy to see that level of balance. And I'm trying to contribute to that balance myself around talking about these big, sexy retail brand names that have got 50 stores in their chain, plus an online practice, or maybe they got 10 brands under their banner. And talking about some of the smaller, more agile brands, B2B brands, D2C, direct-to-consumer brands, and hybrid brands that are, maybe they're B2B and they're D2C. So they sell to resellers, but they also, sell direct to the consumer. And Nike is a hybrid model where they're omni-channel, and they're not just digital channel and physical channel, but they're also omni business model. So maybe they've got a B2C play, maybe they've got a B2B play, and maybe they've got a D2C play, and maybe they resell not only their own products but other people's products alongside their products with non-competing categories. They sell wholesale, and sometimes they sell in a pure D2C model, whether that be online only or omni-channel with bricks and mortar stores in the case of a Nike, where they've got online and bricks and mortar. So I'm seeing this shift happen in the marketplace, and I think e-commerce platforms, as well as operational platforms that can support omni-channel selling, not just digital channel selling and not just online, offline digital selling and digital type of experiences, but platforms that can support multimodal selling and different merchant approaches to the market. So any platform that can support, say, a D2C play in the one platform, I think has got a really bright future ahead, because what I'm seeing in the marketplace is that there's massive blue ocean stuff happening in the B2B space, where a lot of B2B brands, especially pure B2B brands, they either have no e-commerce play at all and no e-commerce functionality at all, because they have historically relied on field salespeople to go out there, and field sales reps and account managers and BDMs and things like that to be on site with their B2B customers. But through COVID, they haven't been able to. And so the non-digital teams, the field sales reps, are crying out for better digital sales tools, combined with the end B2B customer demanding digital capability and the ability to transact e-commerce with the business. That's putting massive pressure on B2B verticals that have traditionally had virtually no digital enablement at all. And so I'm seeing more demand from B2B businesses wanting to digitalize their operations and wanting to create an e-commerce play and capability for themselves. And just the demand is incredible. And so I think any platform that either has a B2B focus or has B2B capability added in, I think they have a lot of blue ocean opportunity moving forward. And I think that falls in line with what BigCommerce is doing and trying to really publicize their B2B edition and all the enhanced B2B specific functionality that they bring to the table. B2B customers being able to pay via invoice or statement, being able to have, the different customer groups and price lists, and being able to have, show different payment methods depending on the customer and their credit limits and all sorts of other things, being able to request quotes through the front end, all this sort of really complex B2B functionality. Any platform that can handle that, I think, has some massive opportunity moving forward in the e-commerce space. And that's what we're seeing in the market already. I think if we move on from there, one of the next big pieces of news that has come out over the last week is Lightspeed. So Lightspeed is a Canadian-based company similar to Shopify in the sense that they're both based out of Canada. They're both based on are focused on the retail space. But Lightspeed, and I've actually worked with Lightspeed before because they are a point of sale system that a lot of the brands that I've consulted to either are running already as their POS system, their point of sale system, or they were looking at implementing it and they wanted to know, okay, well, if we implement Lightspeed, what does that mean for integrating with other systems and making them talk together and share data? So, but Lightspeed has been focused really tightly on the point of sale market for years. And what we're seeing now, and we're seeing this vectorization of technology whereby everybody wants to get in on the omni-channel game, and they want to provide as much of a complete omni-channel stack as possible. But the way that they get there, it depends on kind of where they started from. And so obviously we see Shopify, who started out as pretty much a pure e-commerce platform player, and then they added POS, and now they're adding ever more omni-channel capability to the core platform. We're seeing Lightspeed and other brands like them come at this from their particular angle or their particular vector. And so we've seen them just in the last week. They acquired Ecwid, which is an e-commerce or retail-focused e-commerce platform, and they also acquired the New Order B2B e-commerce platform or catalog platform. And they splashed out $925 million, nearly $1 billion in cash and stock to buy these two companies, and that's after spending $350 million on Vend, which is a New Zealand-based and New Zealand-developed point of sale platform. That's a SaaS platform, only a couple of months ago. So Lightspeed is absolutely on the warpath, but I think the bigger story here is the vector at which all these companies are coming at omnichannel and trying to build out their omnichannel capability through acquisition. And I think not only are they trying to build out their tech capability, but they're trying to acquire full stack commerce know-how and development firepower en masse. And, there's a mad rush, and, Mike, you'll be able to speak to this. It is difficult, if not impossible nowadays, to find developers at scale to help build out your technology quickly. And so I think a lot of these acquisitions have as much, if not more, to do with acquiring talent as they do acquiring the core technology, because at the end of the day, they'll have to incorporate that core technology into their base stack to make it a seamless offer for the marketplace. And I think it's quite reminiscent of Sin 7. Sin 7 recently, just a couple of months ago, they acquired Deer Systems, and they acquired another logistics and shipment company to incorporate into kind of their quasi ERP stack. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to build out all their omni-channel commerce capability from the perspective of an inventory management, warehouse management / quasi ERP platform. So all of these various different companies are jockeying for position in terms of trying to bring that full stack commerce solution to market, so that merchants don't have a reason to bring in 5 different components into the stack, where they kind of have an all-in-one, one throat to choke solution. And that's where everybody is heading towards, and that's where they're all racing towards. So that's what's driving a lot of these acquisitions, and I don't see this slowing down. We see the recent acquisition of Riversand. We've seen so many acquisitions in the technology space, CDP acquisitions, by Salesforce and by SAP. We're seeing acquisitions across the whole of the commerce stack, and that is only going to accelerate as these megacorps try to jockey for ownership of the full stack commerce solution for merchants, B2B, B2C, and D2C. So super interesting there. And again, Mike, you're probably going to be pretty interested in this one, and I think you've spoken a little bit about this one. But as we got into Creator Week over the last week with Facebook and Instagram's Creator Week, where they were announcing a lot of new announcements in terms of their product roadmap, both in terms of what the end customer, the end user of those platforms can expect out of their platform moving forward. Really, the announcements have centered on how Facebook is looking to empower creators to be able to monetize not only their followings in an easier, more seamless way, but how they're able to engage with brands and become affiliates, or effectively reselling influencers for those brands. And there's so much happening in that space right now. We've seen Twitter, Pinterest. We've seen so many announcements by all the major social platforms. We've seen so much announcements really from every corner of the world, with every platform, with TikTok. Every major platform has really tried to court and keep the influencers and the creators on their platform by introducing new functions that allow them to monetize their audience in new, less intrusive ways. And these announcements by Facebook are probably the biggest, most game-changing announcements in this area that I've seen, certainly in the last 18 months, if not ever. And so, I can't go into all the details here because it was a massive announcement. You can check out my post on LinkedIn on it. Huge. And then if we look at the almost simultaneously, it was just one day before, Pinterest announced the ability to save shopping lists as they edge into the commerce side of things. So if you look at what Facebook and Instagram are doing, they're trying to edge into commerce by creating social commerce experiences where you never have to leave the app. So in-app commerce. TikTok is trying to do the same. Pinterest direction. And it's going to be interesting to see how they may pivot out of a saved shopping list. Okay, well, it's a pretty small jump to go from a saved shopping list to a shopping cart that you can check out and pay with in the app. So the ability for brands to be able to pin their catalog in their posts, and also for other influencers of those brands to be able to pin their products, and then for people that are browsing Pinterest to be able to add those to a shopping list and be able to check out with them. It feels like a very logical stepping stone into that full-blown commerce scenario. And we're seeing that across pretty much every single social platform that they want to get into the commerce vector. As brands, the skyrocketing cost of ads on these platforms is going through the roof, and it's keeping a lot of brands out of being able to afford advertising at scale on these platforms. And so by being able to leverage influencers who get a piece of the pie of each sale, it allows them to continue to leverage the platforms without necessarily paying for ads on those platforms. So it can be really interesting to see how this continues to play out moving forward. Mike, just speaking to your point, so Mike mentions, he says, I'm not sure how I feel about Acqui hiring. It's taking for granted that the existing team would have wanted to work for you in the first place. Absolutely. I agree with that, but I think that's part of the bigger integration effort that always takes place when you acquire a technology, a business, a team. When we think about integrating two businesses together, there's many, many different angles you have to look at it through. You have to integrate the culture, you have to integrate the tech, you have to integrate the teams, you have to integrate the regions, because oftentimes these businesses are operating in different regions around the world, different time zones, different languages. There's a lot at stake here. And I think that technology companies, there's been a mixed bag of success with some of these technology acquisitions and team acquisitions. You know, Adobe's had mixed success with it. Oracle's had mixed success with it. Salesforce has had mixed success with it. If we look at some of the biggest players in that digital sort of customer experiential commerce space, they've all had mixed success. Sometimes it's gone really, really well for them, and sometimes they've kind of had, mass exoduses within months of the acquisition. So, yeah, absolutely, totally agree with you. It's not a given that it's going to work out, but I think these brands are willing to take a certain amount of attrition, and they probably build that into their models, that they're going to lose, say, 20% of the staff that may not like the new acquired culture, but they're not going to lose everybody, and they can at least carry the tech, and they can at least carry the IP into the integration of their technology, their companies, and their operations. So I think there's pros and cons to acquisitions. Totally agree with you, Mike. But I think these businesses are most definitely looking at talent and tech. It's neither one or the other. It's both that they're acquiring. Otherwise, they wouldn't be paying these sky high valuations for these companies just to acquire a bit of technology. It doesn't make sense. So, Cam, thanks very much for your comment. Rise of influencers and social feeds promoting items that you don't have to move off platform to purchase makes a lot of sense. Absolutely, totally agree with you. In-app purchases, it's starting to come to Facebook. It's coming to Facebook and Instagram in the States first. It always seems to be the way. These beta programs, even live shopping beta, always comes to the United States first. And then once they kind of iron out all the kinks and work out all the payment methods and work out all the taxation issues and work out all the cross-border shipping issues and the digital wallet and privacy issues, kind of once they work all of that out in one area, and obviously being American focused, American-centric, American-based companies, they tend to focus on the States first, which makes sense. But once they iron it out there, then they traditionally try to roll that out as globally as they can, typically other than Asia for the most part, because the whole legal system there and everything else, and particularly in China, is just a whole different kettle of fish. So yeah, absolutely. I think that in-app purchasing, it's a given. It's going to happen. They have to work out the technicalities of it. But I think once that comes, we're gonna start seeing that traditional redirect to an e-commerce site to complete a transaction. We're going to see that slowly fade away in favor of contextual commerce happening right then and there, wherever the person is at that particular point in time. So it's not disruptive, it's native, it's seamless, and it's natural wherever they are. And this is part of the commerce everywhere future, which I know Mike and lots of others are working towards. So that's super exciting to see. I guess the last piece of news that really is I haven't written about yet, but I did want to talk about it, is Squarespace's IPO or non-IPO, really. Although they did a direct listing on the New York Stock Exchange, they didn't do it through a traditional IPO where they're offering up new shares. They've really just put the existing shares into the market so that the holders of those shares can actually resell those shares. So they're not creating new liquidity. They're not bringing any new funding through their quote unquote non-IPO, but they will be traded on the open market now. And so they kind of are doing it a slightly different approach. But the key for me is that the most recent private funding round for Squarespace valued it at $10 billion. Now, we have to remember that Squarespace is primarily a content management platform. It's a CMS. So it's like a Weebly, it's like a Wix, it's like lots of those web-based content management, web builder, page builder type platforms. And all of these platforms are starting to bolt on to the side of them commerce functionality, and that's where they see their future. It's not a massive part of their revenue today. If you look at their revenue breakdown of Squarespace, commerce the commerce module bolt-on is a fraction of their overall revenue, whereas the most of their subscription comes from their traditional website builder platform. But I think what this hints at, and I think this is critical, is the absolute obscene and radically growing valuations of anything to do with the e-commerce / web space. The reality is that all of these valuations are stratospheric, and we're seeing them grow. We're not seeing them sort of retrench as the world opens up back out of COVID, and we're now just have sort of rolling global lockdowns. We're not seeing those valuations drop as things get back to this new normal, this new level of e-commerce demand. But we've got these sky high valuations, even on platforms that aren't traditionally e-commerce platforms. They're content focused platforms, brochure / blog site type platforms. Even they're getting in on the act. And even if we look at something like a MailChimp, which this news came out over a month ago, so it's a little bit of old news, but even with MailChimp, them getting into commerce and building out their own e-commerce platform to run alongside and in parallel as an option alongside their mailing list platform, that has increased their value pretty radically. Pretty much straight away after they made their announcement, all the pundits were saying how much it was going to increase their enterprise value. So it's very, very interesting to see even platforms that aren't traditionally e-commerce focused, the moment they even hint to the market that they are targeting the e-commerce and digital commerce space and omni-channel space, it kind of has this magical effect on their valuation, and it seems to cause it to go right through the roof. So, you can expect more announcements like this from the general market around e-commerce as e-commerce has become the hot buzzword due to COVID. So really, really amazing stuff. Mike, appreciate your comment there around Instagram shopping, pretty slick in the US. Will be interesting when it really hits Australia, New Zealand. So yeah, totally agree. We've seen in the last couple of weeks, we've seen Shopify roll out Shopify Pause / retail support in Australia. I'm hoping it comes to New Zealand soon as well. So yeah, all this stuff seems to be pretty American centric, and then it eventually comes to Australia. It seems like tends to be near the top of the list, but New Zealand and other countries seem to be much further down the list. So we'll see how that plays out. Jethro, thanks for commenting there. Who do you predict buys who next? Man, that's a really tough one. I think from what I'm seeing in the market, the CDP acquisition space is probably the hot space at the moment. But then again, I wasn't really expecting her to get acquired either. So I think the PIM acquisition space is running really hot. So it could be an acquisition of InRiver. I think they're ripe for acquisition, just like Riversand was, and is a big PIM competitor to Riversand. We're even seeing acquisition of some quote unquote open source / PaaS platforms, platform as a service platforms. So it could be a PIM core, could be somebody that gets acquired and gets integrated into a SaaS stack with one of the other major players like Adobe, etc. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'll certainly stay up with the news as it happens, and luckily, unfortunately, I've got some well-placed people in the industry that sort of feed me some information. I tend to hit things at least a little bit before they hit the mainstream news, or often do anyway. So I'll definitely keep everybody informed, and it is a very, very exciting space. Run 6 minutes over, but I will leave it open for just a couple more minutes here, and if anybody's got any specific questions for me that I hopefully answer in these last few minutes here, I'll go through to 4:40 New Zealand time, 2:40 Australian time. Thank you all for joining me. Really, really appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Appreciate your attention. And I'm really, really looking forward to this live thing. It's actually a really cool thing, and I love how StreamYard tends to bring in this sort of stream I can watch on the right-hand side of the screen. I can see all the commentary coming in and the questions coming in, and I can sort of incorporate those into my commentary, which is a really cool feature. So I'm really loving the whole live thing. It's a totally different dynamic to pre-recording either video or podcast or email or even social posting. It's a totally different dynamic, and it really forces you to kind of think on your feet, which I really love. So thank you all for coming along and spending time with me. I'll give it just a couple more minutes here to see if there's, I don't see anything else coming across in the feed from any of the channels right now. No, I don't see anything else coming in. Cool. All right. Well, I won't take up any more of your Friday. Go have it's probably Friday drinks for a lot of you about this time. So I'll let you get back to it. But thank you for spending the time with. Really, really appreciate it. And I'll be back here next Friday, and you'll see me in your feeds across most of the social platforms during the week anyway. So really look forward to catching up with you guys again next week. And yeah, have a fantastic weekend for those of us that are on the weekend down here in ANZ. Ralph, we'll definitely have that beer soon. We have this little thing called COVID that's playing havoc with travel across the ditch to Australia and back and forth. But yes, absolutely. Catching up with my Australian mates and colleagues is definitely very high on my priority list this year. And my mother, my sister, my brother-in-law, my two nephews all live in Brizzy. So I have additional reasons to get across and visit Australia anyway. So I don't need, it's not like I need any more reason or justification to get across to visit Aussie. I have lots of reasons to get across there and definitely high on my priority list. So I'm hoping by a little bit later this year, I may get across for one or two of the conferences happening later this year and then be able to catch up with all of you whilst I'm across. Again, thank you for your time. Have a fantastic weekend, and we'll catch up with you guys during the week on the socials and next week on the broadcast. Cheers, guys. Catch you up.